Hey, what is up, you frickin' degenerates? Today, I hope you guys are ready for some history about Glock. Boy, are we in for a long one. Not only am I going to be going through the history of the development of Glocks and when they finally came to America, but I'm also going to break down the naming system as it's confusing as hell. Just a heads up, no matter how many times I would have read this, I wouldn't have remembered it all, so I will be reading from the notes that I took. So here we go. Ah, well, first we need to go back to Austria, home of Gaston Glock and a shitty failed art student who won't be named. Let's just say he's the reason why my German heritage won't allow me to own anything that says SS or build ovens. Ugh. Let me take you all the way back to 1963 in Wagram, Austria, where the foundation of Glock KG was created by Gaston Glock, a very successful businessman and Austrian engineer. Which, let's face it, he is the only other name that we know of from Austria. If there's anyone to simp for, it's him. The foundation originally had 3 employees and only produced consumer goods like doorknobs, curtain rods, and other commercial appliances. Wow, that's just crazy. How do you go from making this? How do you go to making this from doorknobs and appliances? Kind of crazy. Ugh. Then in the 1970s, things started to change, and that's when Big Daddy government started wanting some small stuff done for the military. The company started making things like grenade casing, field knives, machine gun belts for the Austrian military. In 1980 is when things started picking up a little bit more. Gaston bought a injection molding machine, which is basically a 3D printer, but instead of using a computer and CAD, there's a mold that melted hot plastic, or in this case polymer, goes into and then cools into that part that is desired. After acquiring this machine, he had started producing sheaths and knife handles for the products he was already making for the military. In the early 1980s, Glock was invited to bid on a new service pistol contract for the Austrian military. Government. And with all the knowledge that he had created he created the first polymer frame semi-automatic handgun, the Glock 19. Boy, it's the most basic fucking thing there is. And he created the Glock 17. And the revolutionary safe action system. The firearm safe action system was designed so the weapon was ready to go and be used in a life-threatening situation. You might be asking, what is this safe action system? Well, because Glock wanted the firearm to still be safe but ready to fire at a moment's notice, he developed 3 different internal safeties. There's a safety built into the trigger, the slide, and the frame itself. Let's go over them one by one because they all interact with each other. Let's start with the trigger safety, which is basically like the condom that most of you wish you would have worn. The trigger safety is basically like a trigger inside of the actual trigger. In order to pull the trigger, you need to decompress the trigger before you pull the trigger. Well, trigger before you pull the trigger. Which means having proper trigger control and trigger finger placement. All right, so for a demonstration, yes, this is clear, I promise. What I'm talking about when I say trigger is that little trigger right there. That needs to be depressed before you can fully pull the trigger. Like right now, this is unloaded, nothing in the chamber, and the trigger is pulled all the way back. So, just to show clear, there, I just reset the trigger. So in order to be able to fire the handgun, this little notch right there needs to be depressed before you can pull the trigger. Kind of like a little extra take up. And then once you pull it back, you can fire. All right, now let's get back to it. If it isn't pressed, then the trigger will not move, like I just demonstrated. The firing pin safety works alongside this also. Once the trigger is pulled, it will activate the firing pin safety by pressing against a plunger underneath the slide that will let the firing pin go forward. Because of this design, it also has a drop safety that in case the firearm is dropped, that it will not discharge due to the trigger not being pulled and the drop safety activating. The firing pin will not go off. Look, I'm no weapons engineer and will never claim to be an expert on how this works to a T. Anyways, let's get back to it. The Glock 17 met all of the Austrian military and law enforcement criteria, such as high capacity, lightweight, hammer forged barrel, and consistent trigger pull. The motherfucker literally built a brick because it didn't need to be flashy, but it needed to be reliable. But for it to be reliable, he realized that reliability is simplicity. He designed the gun with as little parts as possible. Hell, today's Glock 17 is made of around 35 parts. Talk about fucking simplicity and easy to work on. It literally has 3 pins holding all of the frame internals together. Wild. Finally, after all of his hard work, he won the contract in 1983, and then in 1984, the Glock 17 passed the NATO durability test and was adopted by the Norwegian Army as their standard sidearm. This put Glock's name on the map as a potential to be the international standard for law enforcement sidearms. Fast forward to 1985, Glock must have had a hankering for some peaches because they opened up a U.S. headquarters in Smyrna, Georgia, where it eventually gained so much popularity along law enforcement that 65% of federal, state, and local agencies adopted the use and standardized Glock pistols. And over the years, Glock created multiple firearms, all sharing the same safe action polymer design. But what changed was the different calibers and sizes offered. The first generation of all Glock models were produced from 1983 and 1987. So that's only going to be, I believe, the Glock 17. All calibers offered in the first generation were 9mm only. Oh yeah, I guess I put that in there. Yeah, it was only the 17. The second generation came out in 88, had some design changes to the frame to serve different customer requirements and add more calibers to the Glock family. All the calibers introduced during this generation were 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP, 380 ACP, and 10mm auto. The second generation lasted from 1988 to 1997. Almost 10 years, no design changes. Holy fuck. In 1998, they released the Gen 3 along with some new calibers such as 357 SIG and 45 Gap. Glock made some design changes to the frame by adding finger grooves on the grip and the thumb rest on the frame, and also adding an accessory rail. This generation lasted for 11 years. Let me say that again. 11 fucking years. Ultimately, in my opinion, this is the best generation simply because of the availability of aftermarket parts for the Gen 3, from triggers to slides to hell, even frames. This generation lasted from 1998 to 2009. In 2000, during the third generation, Glock created its first single stack in 45 ACP. Time for the fourth generation, which made the base grip smaller, made the back strap removable and customizable, and a dual magazine spring to reduce felt recoil and add longevity to the firearms. No new calibers were released for this generation. This generation lasted from 2010 to 2016. The current generation, Gen 5, tons of changes to the most popular handgun on the market with upgraded magazine catches, revised mag base plate design, flared mag well for easier reloads. Sadly, They removed the finger grooves, but eliminated Glock knuckle by making a relief cut by the trigger guard, upgraded to a marksman barrel, and made the slide wider. Sadly, on December 27th, 2023, Gaston Glock passed away and handed his business down to his daughter. May this great mind rest in peace. Now for the fun part. How do I know what Glock model is what? What do the numbers mean? So Glock's naming scheme is based off of the patent. So the first one being the Glock 17 is the 17th patent that finally actually worked. And then it goes up from there. All of the different models are in patent order. So it goes 17, 18, 19. There's not skipping. Although, with what they are and what they're named can be confusing anytime. Like when I say Glock 45, you probably think of 45 ACP. Well, no, it's actually a 9mm handgun. Confusing, right? How about Glock 22? Think 22 long rifle, am I right? No, it's a 40 Smith & Wesson. How the fuck is that not confusing? But it's ultimately pretty great because his entire thing when making this handgun was following the k.i.s.s standard. Keep it simple, stupid. And this is the most fucking simplistic handgun on the market. Ugh. All right, so I'm going to go through all the different models by caliber. All right, so all 9mm are going to be your 17, 17C, 17 MOS, 17L, 18C, 19, 19C, 19X, 26, 43, 43X, 34, 46, and 47. Oh, and then also can't forget about the Glock 45. And fun fact, Glock 18 and Glock 18C are both fully automatic versions that we do not get to see here in the US. That's fucking insane. Sadly, they were made after 1986, so we can't get them pre-sample anyway, so you kind of need licensing. All right, so now we're going to move on to 380 ACP. There's only 3 models in this one. The 25, the 42, and the 28. The 25 is going to be the size of a Glock 19. The 28 is going to be the size of a 26. And I think the 42 is going to be the size of a 43. I could be wrong. It might be the other way around for the 42 and 28. 40 Smith & Wesson, we got the 22, the 23, the 24, 27, and 35. You still with me? It's confusing, isn't it? Then for the 45 ACP, we got the 21, the 30, the 36, and the 41. Still keeping up. 10mm auto, we have the 20, the 29, and 40. Again, confusing. Glock 40, you would think 40 Smith & Wesson. Although with the Glock 40, it's kind of similar as 10mm is a 40 caliber bullet. That's the size of the projectile that it shoots. 357 SIG is literally directly in order: 31, 32, and 33. 45 gap, again, also in order: 37, 38, 39. And finally, we have the 22 long rifle, which is a Glock 44. Ultimately, from what I've heard, the most unreliable piece of shit that Glock makes. Well, I've spewed on enough with this bullshit, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and always remember to stay safe, stay trained, and never trust the government. But most importantly, don't stop being a degenerate.